So let's look at loops. We've seen already two types of program control structures. We've seen sequential program control and we've seen decision program control, like if, then statements and switch or case statements. So let's look now at loops. Loops allow us to execute the same set of statements over and over again, a number of times that we want to repeat it. So look again at this example we've seen before, where we input the number of hours worked, we input the hourly pay rate, we multiply the two, and we store the result in some gross pay variable. So imagine that we want to repeat this a couple of times. So let's first make it more compact and group this amount of statements into what we can call a procedure. So we make a procedure that we call calculate gross pay that gets two inputs. One is the hours worked and the other is the hourly pay rate. And now we make a procedure that if we call this with these two inputs, what it does is multiply them together and store the result in a variable that's called gross pay. So now imagine we want to repeat this 5 times. We can do this with a for loop. A for loop is meant if we know how many times we want to repeat something and execute it that amount of time. So on the slide we see an example. We say for loop count is 1. So here we initialize the counter of our loop. This is the one that's going to count how many times we have repeated the statement. Then we say do this until the loop count is less than or equal to 5. So while loop count is less than or equal to 5, go on, because we want to do it 5 times. So every step we need to increment by 1 the loop counter. So we start at 1, calculate gross pay 1 time, check if loop count is less than or equal to 5. If it is, we add 1 and go on. So that's why how we execute it 5 times. So let's look at the syntax and the semantics of this for loop. So it has a keyword for, and then we have initialization, a test, an update, and after that the statements or a block of statements that we want to execute. So the initialization initializes the counter, the test is a Boolean expression that is true or false and indicates when we have to stop the loop or not, and update indicates what we need to do with the counter. And the semantics is, so the initialization says, initialize your counter to this value. The counter is the control variable that controls the loop. The test controls the execution of the loop. And as long as it's true, we iterate again. And update changes the control variable, the counter of the loop. So this is the syntax and the semantics of a for loop. We also have while loops. While loops we mostly use when we don't actually really know the exact amount of iterations, but the number of iterations depend on some Boolean expression. Here we see an example that we've seen before actually. It's this piece of code that prints a number a maximum amount of time. So we assign 1 to the variable number, and while the number is less than or equal to maximum, we print a number and we increment the number. And we do this until the number is maximum. So this is a while loop. So control flow structures like if statements, case statements, for loops, and while loops determine the control flow of your program. What statements are being executed and what are the conditions that they depend on. So this control flow of a program can be depicted in a control flow diagram, or CFG. And here on this slide we see an example of the control flow graph of the little program we've seen before. So we enter our program. If the number is 1, we assign 1 to this number, and if this number is less than or equal to the maximum, we do these statements. And we do them until the number is not less than or equal to maximum anymore, and then we stop the program. So in the next part, we'll look at event-driven program and how this is different from the programs we've seen till now.